Welcome back to the garage, the place where we are making your Bronco, your dream Bronco. Hey, if this is your first time here, I'd love to have you subscribe. I'm putting out how-to videos for the weekend mechanic and just talking Bronco stuff for the Bronco community. Today what we're doing is I'm actually replacing the head gaskets on my 1975 Ford 302. Step one is draining the radiator. There's a lot of coolant running through the engine, and draining the coolant will save you some cleanup. Step two is removing the distributor, valve covers, and intake manifold. On my 302, I had to remove the valve covers on both sides of the block, then remove my intake manifold to get to the heads. After the intake is out, you need to remove the exhaust manifold or the headers. I just unbolted these from the head and pushed them out of the way. At this point, I removed the rockers and push rods to get them out of the way. Then you can get to the head. There are 4 bolts on the top and 4 bolts on the bottom. I also had a bolt running through my alternator bracket at the front of the engine. There it is. There is our answer. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a blown head gasket. So now that we've got the heads out of the Bronco, we're gonna go ahead and clean them up. Now I know a lot of you would be like, oh, why don't you do X, Y, and Z? Why don't you do this while the heads are out? Why don't you get new heads, blah, 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 blah. For right now, this is a cheap project. I'm just gonna clean this up, throw some new gaskets on it, and put it back in the Bronco and drive it for a while longer. Now the first step I'm gonna do in tearing this down is I am going to remove the valve springs, remove the valves, and get all of this taken apart so that I can clean it up. To remove the valves, you'll need a valve spring compressor. I rented this one from O'Reilly's and it did the job. With all the valve springs removed, I could pull the valves out and clean them up. I made a mixture of acetone and transmission fluid on a Scotch-Brite pad and razors to clean up most of the heads and the valves. With everything cleaned up, the last step is valve lapping. I'm using this Permatex valve lapping compound in this lapping tool, putting the compound on the edge of the valves and spinning until I hear it spin smooth. Now that everything's cleaned up, I'll take my heads to a machine shop and make sure they aren't warped, and then I'll clean up my pistons and cylinders. Now the next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna torque my ARP bolts down. And so the sequence that you torque them down is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you gotta follow that sequence. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna torque them down first to 50 foot-pounds. Then I'm gonna torque them down to 60 foot-pounds. And then my last one is I'm going to torque them down to between 65 and 72 foot-pounds. Now, an important thing to note is that these head gaskets call out the front, and that's because they block off the water ports at the front of the block. So it's very important that you put this in the front and the water ports are open in the back, because if your water ports are open up here, then there's going to be too much flow through the engine, through the block, and it's actually going to cause your engine to overheat. So you want to make sure that you put the front of the head gasket towards the front of the engine, blocking the water ports right there. All right, so that is going to be it for this episode. Now, everything just kind of goes back together the same way it came apart, but there's a couple other videos that I want to film with the doing some other stuff on the engine before I put it all back together. So I'm not going to fire it up today. I'm not going to, you're not going to be able to hear it run. I'm hoping everything just kind of goes back together and I can get some of this other stuff done and drive this thing pretty soon here. So, but that's it. That's going to be it for this episode. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.